welcome, everyone. This is SOS Podcast, not SOS Radio. Starting to do a few more live stream interviews. We did one with our dear friend Joseph Beard a couple weeks back, and today we have Christina Taylor with us from Orthodox Family Life. Welcome, Christina. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to have this conversation, as I am with all my conversations, because I pick amazing guests. We talk about amazing subjects. And I think this subject is one of the most important and one of the least talked about. I want to get into your story and all that, but I want to move from there into the direction of Orthodox women, Orthodox families, homeschooling, the importance of all of that, and what it means to be a woman in the church. I remember always growing up, the women were a key component to keeping everything together, not only just in the Greek family, but also in church life, festivals and all that, which were always intermixed with our faith. You couldn't separate the two. And women were the glue. They kept everybody together. They were like the conduit between the priests and the laity. They were the support system and all of that stuff. And I find that online, we all get caught up in a lot of debating, a lot of theology, a lot of this and that, and it's a very masculine thing to do. And there's value to that, of course, but I think we've overlooked this role of women, and I think that you do a great job with your channel, your show that you've just started, your podcast online, and I'm sure everyone in the chat will follow you and has been following you. I've gotten some messages already that your content is amazing.
Oh, good. Well, thank you.
So I'll stop jabbering. Let's start off with an introduction. Who are you? What's your channel about? And a little bit about your story, because I think your story is really important, a very important story.
Yeah, well, sure. I'd love to first actually respond to the beautiful intro you just did about women in the Greek culture being that glue for the people. And one thing I've noticed is that as Americans, a lot of us, myself included, have come from broken homes and dysfunctional homes. And so it's not just an online issue, it's actually an American issue. Yep. And I think once you start to make friends with people, you can kind of get a feel for, did they come from an intact family, including the extended family, or were they from a broken family? And we have just an epidemic of people who don't know what it's like to have any family at all. And so the original title of my channel was actually Building Orthodox Culture to do exactly what you just explained. But I felt like maybe that was too hard to explain over and over to people that, they might not get it. So I changed it to Orthodox Family Life. But the two are integrated. The women really do, traditionally have, it's not just about being a trad wife at home and baking cookies, right? But it's about taking care of the elderly and helping the younger moms, and as you said, working for the church where they do the flowers and they bake the prosphora and clean the church. There's just so much. They visit the elderly and the sick in the church. There's so much there that I think that's really the hidden victim, the loss of that with feminism.
Yes.
And we always talk about what women can do in the workplace, but we never talk about the cost to our culture and family life. So I think you're right on about that.
Well, I definitely want to go there either now, later. It's totally up to you. This show is a very free-form kind of conversation. So,
well, I'll start with my story, but I just thought you said that so beautifully, and I wanted to respond.
Awesome.
So I grew up in Florida. Was an 80s and 90s kid. Everybody in Florida's really the South. So we grew up Protestant there, mostly Baptist. So I was culturally Baptist, but I was, we didn't really go to church. My mother was severely mentally ill. She had every diagnosis from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar, schizoaffective, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder. So when I was in middle school, she started therapy and medication, and she really just never came out of that. So she would walk in circles in the living room and actually wore a path in the carpet from just, the heavy medication she was on, Haldol and lithium. So my father, I think, was just trying to cope with all of that. And my sister and I were pretty much on our own emotionally for, our from then on. I was 11, she was 15. And so with this very chaotic childhood where my dad, he was doing his best, but it was a hard situation. There was no emotional support. I never remember people actually feeding me. It's such a basic thing, but I don't remember like really basic things like that. So we had to, care for ourselves. And I don't blame my parents for that. They're both departed now. And I think they did the best that they could, but it was a hard childhood.
Yeah.
And so I think when you go through things like that, it really makes you ask the bigger questions of, what is this all about? I think, too, this is about the time when therapy was becoming normalized through Oprah and other places like that. So
Yep.
back then it was such a taboo that, if I said something to a friend, just to me, it was the normal thing to talk about and to experience. But people would really freak out, like, are you okay? Or they'd start crying. And I'm thinking, well, like, what's wrong with you? Like, this is just my life. And so I definitely always felt on the outside. And I think that's partly why the whole punk rock scene really resonated with me, because I just knew I was different from the other kids in my class. So by the time I'm in 8th grade, I go to a public art school. It's an 8th to 12th grade school. Not a very good musician, but I was a bass player in the orchestra and loved it, really loved it, actually. And so this school was very small, very intimate, and, it was this hotbed of alternative thinking, right? You had your punks and hippies and alternative kids. The music was also, of course, becoming mainstream at that point. And so in these years, I was doing some light partying, and I just knew that if I stayed on that path, that I wasn't going to survive. And I just had a deep longing and a deep longing for God and a deep sadness, and just didn't see a way out. And so it ends up being Thanksgiving 30 years ago this year, actually, 1994.
Okay.
And at that point, my dad had taken off. We were living with my mom. My sister had a baby. And I think my dad must have come home. And so he took my mom out for Thanksgiving. My sister went to her boyfriend's house. And here I am at 17, supporting myself, going to school part-time. And everyone just left. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be pathetic. I'll make myself a little Thanksgiving dinner. So I went to the store and bought canned, turkey and canned peas and made a little meal. And we're in this bare apartment because we had been kicked out by our landlord because my mom was in the hospital. And so he just kicked my sister and I out.
What?
Crazy.
Really?
So I sit down to eat this Thanksgiving meal, and I just fall apart. I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And so it was the next Sunday that I first walked into the Orthodox church. And I had found the church because a kid in my high school who was an actor, he was in the drama department. He was a Christian, it was well known, but he was also very kind. And he was liked by everyone, but he was liked because he was kind. He wasn't, popular or obnoxious or anything. And he always blessed his food before he ate. So in a very liberal art school, you can imagine, that really stood out. Mm-hmm. So I tracked him down and asked him if he still believed in God. And he was a Protestant at the time, just discovering icons in the church through the study of art in college. So as we sat there in IHOP, he was just explaining to me about the beauty of the church and everything he was learning. And I knew right then that that's what I was. I didn't know any theology. I haven't even met an Orthodox Christian at that point because he's, just a Protestant kid. Haven't been to a church, don't know anything. But there was something, very deep that resonated with me in that moment. And so after Thanksgiving, I finally found the church and became a catechumen a few weeks later and was baptized at 18. So I think I dropped out of high school, was baptized, and turned 18 all in about 2 weeks. in
Wow.
April that year, 95.
That story embodies one of the reasons I kind of came back to the faith. It was when I realized that sorry, your story got me moved a bit, but that looking at the church as a hospital, and that's kind of what your story kind of embodies for me. Is that literally when I came to realize how little I knew about about our faith, and that I didn't really realize it's a hospital. It kind of changed my whole viewpoint of everything. And your story really kind of embodies all of that. That's a hard story to listen to. I heard it before because I heard your interview that you did with Kyle,
Right.
but the way you just told that, I don't know, it was a little bit different. It moved me. Not that the first time it didn't move me, but this one I could feel it in you as you were talking. I don't know. I'm sorry to throw that in there, but I
Yeah, I'm
really
getting
felt
older,
it.
so I get emotional, a little more emotional now when I talk about it. But it was just my life. Like I said, that's the reaction. I'm pretty used to at this point. I do
Yeah.
have people that will sometimes cry when I tell my story, and I'm thinking, well, it's meaningful to me, but it's amazing to me that it strikes other people. But I
It
do
does.
think now, because mental health is such a big issue for people, and people are so lonely. We have this loneliness
Yes.
epidemic.
Yes.
That is why I wanted to start telling my story, because it's a 30-year anniversary this year, and even though I'm old, I think the young people can probably relate to that deep loneliness. And for me, that my conversion to the church was very experiential,
Hmm.
and it was only later that I learned the theology and the history and
Yeah.
all of that. But so I really do appreciate all the channels that do the arguing and the debating, and that's very needed. But
Yep.
for me, it was just so different. Someone just told me about this beauty, and I just thought that's what I am. So I think we need to talk about that more.
Absolutely, and that's what we're definitely going to be talking about more and more on this channel on Board No More. I think this is a subject that I want to have an ongoing series about. Everything we're going to talk about today, everything you just brought up, I think it's important. It's part of our praxis. It's part of understanding how to live the Orthodox life, and not even look at it as something that, I know we always say it as online Orthodox people, like, oh, it's not just a Sunday thing. But you know what? In a lot of ways, we do approach the faith in that way. I know I do, and I'm trying to overcome it and make it like a second to second thing. And your story. First of all, stop calling yourself old.
Like the old.
I think we're the same age. I think we're the same age. So but no, you don't. I think watching a lot of your videos, there's a lot of wisdom that comes from hearing your experience, but also the way you approach other people's experiences and other stories. Like when you talk the episode you did on Saint Mary of Egypt and all that stuff, I could feel Saint Paisios. Like you have some really good content on your channel. So I do want to say
the lives of the saints, or the writings of the saints,
yes.
And it's my little 2 cents at the end. But
Yes,
trying to unpack it a little bit for people. But I think I was mentioning, to you earlier, that the thing with Saint Mary of Egypt was, it came out of a lot of anger, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I try to stay in touch with the culture and what the kids are doing, because I have, young people. I have 4 young adults, and my youngest is 16. So I like to know about the world they're in. And so I have been watching, not a ton, but some of the whatever podcasts in that whole red pill, calling out the quote unquote 304s.
Yeah.
And I was so horrified by it that I actually became angry, because it's one thing for the world to say that, but when I hear Orthodox people in other places use that same kind of language, that women that lose their purity are worthless. It's like, well, how dare you? That's not what the Lord says.
Mm-hmm.
And we can look at the life of Saint Mary of Egypt, who was worse than most of the girls now, because she refused payment. She wasn't even a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
And yet she, through her repentance, became so holy and completely healed. And I think we can drive people to despair if we just say, well, you're terrible and you're worthless and there's no hope for you. Like, that's that's the opposite of the gospel, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a real physical response to that. And, I struggled with, do I say in the video that that's kind of what I'm responding to? I chose not to.
Okay.
But most of the videos are actually a response to something I've heard that I feel like people need to think more deeply about.
I like that because it does fit with a little bit of a rant I did on Sunday that kind of got a little bit of it got a positive reaction. I went off on the divisive, like how divided we are as a community, and I did bring up the role of men and women and the importance of understanding that men are not behaving as like men, and that is a big reason as to why the world has gone where it has, and women the same thing, obviously through feminism and all that stuff, and bringing up the whole subject of the Whatever podcast and the 304. I think it's an important subject because I understand both sides. The way it's being presented on there, it's clickbait. And it does give people, and you're correct 100% that Orthodox individuals have to kind of be a little bit more careful on how they have that conversation. And I think it begins with understanding that first is taking accountability for something that has been done, whether it's male or female, and in this case, the 304 thing, and then confessing, repenting, and then trying to heal from that and move forward. And understanding that we have to accept that we all make mistakes. And if we confess and repent, we should do our part to kind of not to ignore these things that have occurred, but to forgive them as the Lord would ask us to do. I think the problem comes when there's excuses for it. Sometimes I've heard this as well. Like I've heard other people just kind of say, well, I did it, whatever, and then just want to move on. And that goes for men too. A lot of things that men do, we don't hold ourselves accountable, and then men kind of get away with some really not cool things, you know what I mean? And I think that that's an important subject that you brought up in that video about St. Mary of Egypt, because that was a big part of her story, is the whole thing about repenting. And I think it surrounds the repentance. How do you feel about that? Like, how do we square that in our modern society? Like admitting we've done things, confessing, and then repenting, and then healing from there within the church.
Well, I think it's all about us taking responsibility for what we did. Mm-hmm. And what I think a lot of people do in the world is they run around with a sieve, and try to sift out everybody else's issues. Yes. It's like, well, pretty sure there was a gospel about that as well, right? That, we all have issues. And with whatever instrument we're using to measure other people, that's what the Lord will use to measure us. Mm-hmm. That's just straight from the Sermon on the Mount. So we have to, if you're going to pick out all of the wrong things other people did, you should be ready for that to be your lot one day.
Yep.
So I think, people do need to repent. We don't want to excuse sin. But it's a different thing to say that they're hopeless. That's a very different thing to say.
This is true.
And if you look at the St. Mary of Egypt story, you'll see the steps of repentance, not just in a general way, but, the very specific steps.
Yes.
Of, coming to herself, when she kept making it into the church, asking God for help, right? Then being obedient to that response back from God. And so there are steps, and that's what we should be sharing with people. Mm-hmm. I'll share another story with you because it's not a recent issue for me. I have 4 children. We homeschooled, and we were often in different Protestant homeschool settings because there's not any, Orthodox homeschoolers a long time ago. And so as our oldest girls started to get in their early teen years, a lot of the moms started talking about this issue of purity and how do you convey this. And one of their popular stories was one woman shared that they went to this really great talk where they had a big vase of roses on the stage. And they took a rose out and they passed it through the crowd and of all the kids. And they said, well, touch the petal, take a petal off, really feel it, how delicate it is, how velvety, how it smells good, all these really beautiful attributes of this rose. And then, they put the rose back in the vase with the others. And then at the end, they say, now, you can come and take a rose to go home. And inevitably, at the end, nobody takes the rose that was passed around. Mm-hmm. And that was the lesson for the kids, that nobody will want you. And when I heard this from the other moms, I just thought, well, God wants you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's sorry, I get really upset about
Mm-hmm.
this. It's
Mm-hmm.
a terrible thing to teach to our children.
Yep.
And so much of what, um, so much of what I process in the world, I always think in terms of what does this mean for my children? Because
Yeah.
you're not just talking to the 25-year-old girl out there on the whatever podcast. You're actually talking to the 16-year-old girls that are listening,
Yes.
right? And maybe they've already made a mistake and now they think their life is over. So I'm just,
That's a good point. That's a
you
very
know,
good point.
we have to teach our kids that if they screw up, there's a way back.
Yeah. Yep.
There's always a way back.
Yes. I really like the way you put that. And I think the key is the acceptance, confession, and repentance, at which point you can heal, and other people can't look at you as the forgotten rose. That's heartbreaking. That I don't like the way that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, imagine being a girl in that
Yeah.
auditorium that had already made a mistake. You know what
Yeah.
her thought would have been? Well, I should just give up on the church because this
Exactly.
is what they're telling me, right?
And then that even leads them to go double down on their bad mistake, and they're most likely going to continue that lifestyle, if not continue it, make it even worse and escalate it and get into like further. Wow, that's a
And I think we should always call sin out. I want to be really clear about that.
yes,
Like it is a
yes,
tragedy when young people, male or female, lose their purity. That's absolutely a tragedy.
yes,
But God is merciful, and there's always a way back. As long as you're living,
yeah,
there's repentance. And
that's
we
right.
have to drill that into our kids because they will make mistakes, whether that's partying in college or losing their purity or getting into, psychedelics or something. They're going to make mistakes.
Hmm.
Some are going to be rather large. And you want them to know the love and mercy of God.
Absolutely, and I have a daughter myself, so I think about these things a lot, and I try to like kind of find a way to, because like things like the whatever podcast, they're very very polarizing, but they're also very extreme. The average girl that's on there isn't the average girl out there, and a lot of them may. It's also there. It's a tool for social engineering on both ways, on both aspects of it. Driving people towards the OnlyFans style of lifestyle. It's also driving people to this extreme view of how they view the females on there, exactly like you just described, and it kind of creates it's very problematic, especially amongst our community. Let's talk a little bit more about family life and how what are some things that we need to bring back from the old days, and then at the same time, which also includes what we just discussed. So I'm not trying to veer away from it, but that, because you're introducing concepts and ideas from back in the day in a modern time. And how do we do that for a lot of converts, let's say, because I know that's a lot of my audience. It's also, I'm seeing a lot of cradle Orthodox coming back to the faith and trying to like balance those mistakes they made, male and female, and then they're trying to come back into the faith and they're trying to balance all that. So let's talk a little bit about how family, like the importance of it, of the old way, and then the modern way of applying it. What are your thoughts on some of that stuff, if that made any sense? Because I have all these ideas and things I want to talk about.
It makes sense. It's just such a big topic, right? Where do you even begin? But I
Yeah.
think you have to just begin at home. And
Mhm.
so if a wife is able to stay home, and I know that financially that can be difficult, but we're in California. We lived on one income. We don't have new cars and things. I mean, you can make sacrifices and in most places make it work. Not everywhere, and not everyone can do that. I realize, but I think more could do it than they think. And so if she's able to stay home, really getting serious about caring for your children. So if you sit home and you're, a trad wife and you make TikTok videos of you, baking cookies, but you're ignoring your child next to you, well, that's not really how this works, right? I feel like the mother's job is to be, and what I mean by that is to dive deeply into her own spiritual life. And this was really hard for me to get when I was a young mother because it felt selfish on one level. But now I understand that you can't give what you don't have.
Yes.
And I know we say that often, but in the homeschooling world, there's a man I follow, Andrew Pudwa, and he talks about this in terms of writing. Well, you can't get Chinese out of a brain that doesn't have Chinese. And you can't pour into your children the wisdom and the beauty of the church if you don't have it in yourself.
Right.
And so you have to take that seriously, your own prayer life, your own liturgical life, reaching out to the older women in the church. I'm really, I think that's so important. I've done a lot on grannies and making friends
Mm-hmm.
on my channel already. Every generation seems to be losing something, and it's pretty terrifying. I think, Mano, you and I are in a generation that straddles two worlds of
Yes.
the technology world and the old world.
Mm-hmm.
And, the people that we knew that went through World War II, right, they're completely different people.
Yep.
And that really frightens me that we're losing that, and the trajectory that we're heading, each generation. There's wonderful things about the younger people, don't get me wrong, but the things that were built up over thousands of years, those we seem to be losing very quickly.
Yes.
And so I think reaching out as a young mother, reaching out to older women, because you're going to become like the women you hang out with.
Yes.
And if you hang out with women that like to get sassy and throw their husband under the bus and talk about inappropriate things, which happens a lot in groups of women, then that's what you're going to be like. But if you pick the old granny at church to hang out with instead, and you go and you help her with her chores, or have her over for tea or something, then you're going to be more and more like her. And that might be hard to hear as a young mom, but I stand by that pretty firmly.
I love that. I really do. That was a great answer. It reminded me of a lyric from Dave Matthews. I know everyone in my audience doesn't like Dave Matthews, and I have my issues with him too. But he said there's a line that he has in one song. He goes, progress took away what forever took to find." And I think you nailed it. We're tossing all of that out. Women do need to learn how to be women from the older women who are still maintaining that lifestyle. Like I look at my mom and that generation. I look at the younger women, looking at them like they're aliens. They don't understand their behavior. They don't understand the preparation for Pascha and all of that stuff. Although there's a bright side that I'm seeing a lot of people come back to all of this. And it goes the same for men too. Absolutely. And I think you nailed it. Hanging out with the older ladies and the older men and seeing what wisdom they have and then trying to incorporate it in our lives is a key component. So
what taking on their life,
yes.
That they're 60-year-olds, cleaning the church and doing things for the church. This isn't just something that keeps them busy during the day. This is because they built the churches that we're all going to now. Do we all remember that? Like my own parish in Sacramento, that we were at for a very long time, was founded by these women who, used to do the bake sales to raise the money to buy the land and to build the church.
Yes.
And so we have to remember that. And I think I've talked about this before, that some of these women have escaped communism. They just have incredible stories. It's so important that we don't lose that. You just need to go and sit at their feet and listen, and it'll start clicking for you. And then lastly, I'd say, as far as what to do with the family, is pay attention to your children.
Yep.
Just get off your phone.
Yep.
Get a light phone or some kind of dumb phone, and pay attention to your children. And whatever you do, don't give them a device. Don't give them a tablet or a smartphone. It just grieves me when I see 2 and 3-year-olds at a restaurant with a tablet. You're stealing from them. You're stealing from them the knowledge of how to be in a restaurant and how to talk to people and how to make eye contact.
Yes.
That's
something that I see here in Mexico that warms my heart. Is they still have a lot of the older behaviors that we recall when we were younger. Men and women holding hands, hugging and kissing. I see it all the time here. Even though they do have cell phones, you see the families together and they're interacting like they used to back in our time. And it's a shame. Like, I haven't been in Canada in a while, but I know when I go back, it's going to be heartbreaking because I know a lot has changed in the last 4 years, even more so than ever before. And I think that's why these conversations that we're having right now are very important. And I think it's I think it's important to understand our roles. I've mentioned that a couple times, but the women that held it all together, that built those churches, it's not looked like that. Like, people don't look at it that way. They don't realize like they're the ones that the bake sales that you're talking about. I remember those like vividly. I remember all the old ladies getting together. Excuse me, old ladies, if you're out there watching, my mom's generation, they would all get together and they would sit there and they would like have these conversations as a guy watching it. It was weird because I would see them laughing and screaming and joking around and throwing things at each other. But it wasn't the way I see young women today. They would be teasing each other. And then you'd be like, what are they doing over there? And I remember thinking as a guy, like, they're just laughing. They're not really doing anything. And then you turn around and then you come back to it and there's a whole festival prepared. All of a sudden there's like all the dressing is out, all the food is out, and everyone's having a good time. And that wouldn't happen without these women. And I think it has a lot to do with what the types of stuff that you discuss and talk about. How do you and your family try to pass that on to your kids and other younger women around you and men? Like, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so in that first full episode I did, I think it's called "The Friends You Need," I talk about the importance of having older women in your life, but also about mentoring the younger women.
Yes.
And by the way, this is straight from St. Paul's, one of his epistles. He talks about the older women ought to teach the younger women how to be, how to be good women. And so I think the women that are, kind of middle-aged or younger women can be reaching out to the young girls. And so here locally, we have some young girls, and most of them homeschool. And so I recently had them all over to learn how to do flower arranging, because that's something I've learned to do for the church. And so this is a time that we get together and we have fun, and we teach them the names of the flowers and how to care for them. There's a lot of very specific, useful knowledge around these, what I think Adam Lockridge called the servile arts. So arts that are in service of others. And so they were able to make their little bouquets, and it was very fun, but it was a way of connecting with the younger generation.
Yeah.
And I also do that through, I have a little friend that I learned how to sew. She was learning how to sew. So we would just share, here's what I'm working on, and I would just make it a point to go to her. Did you make this, what you have on, and what are you working on? And she'd very excitedly bring me, what she's working on to show me. So I think you just reach out. You just say hi to the young people. Think about being a 13-year-old girl. If someone had taken interest in you, in what you were doing with your life, that would have meant so much to me in my life, right? That it's important that we do that. And I've actually been doing that since I was 18. So some of these girls are now 30 and have children of their own, and they still, connect with me when we meet up. And I liken it to like you're sewing threads from person to person in a community. And so the more that you're doing that, the more the community is bound to each other, the old to the young, to the middle. And if we just all kind of go home after liturgy and we're not involved in each other's lives, then, we're still the church, we're still the body of Christ. But if we want that actual community, then we have to reach out and do the mundane things, together, whether it's baking for church or cleaning or helping when someone is sick, or if a woman's having a child, put together some meals, take her a meal every couple of days, right? Have a baby shower. There's endless ways that we can be a part of each other's lives. And I wish we would do that instead of doing things like, gender reveal parties where everything's so commercialized. And now, right, we have to make, now you don't just get engaged, but you have to find the photographer that will hide in the spot and take your picture to savor this very intimate moment, I would argue. And we spend so much time with these trends, and it's always more and more and more. It's all garbage. Just go home and reach out to a young girl or call a granny. Like, that's all you really have to do.
I love everything you've said. So you nailed it. That's so true. It reminds me of Father Moses put out a video about brotherhood and men, and he described something very similar. And that's the one beautiful thing about really having these conversations, is you see that we're not so different. And he's talking about how men bond. They bond not through just sitting around talking about their emotions and feelings. They bond over, like, pouring concrete, cutting down trees, doing these weird little things, having a barbecue, teaching, like, all that stuff. And in those moments, you do talk about your emotions, you do talk about your problems. And I do remember when I was younger, that's when I first started seeing men talk about their marital issues with other men. It was around pouring concrete. Like, you're pouring concrete, and you described the exact same thing with women. And I think that that's something that we do need to keep and kind of pass on to the other gen. I mean, some of us have to remember that. I think I forgot a lot of this, but I think we do need to pass this on. So I really like what you just said. It kind of fits for both genders.
Yeah, and everyone was too busy 100 years ago. There was no
Yes.
sitting around. I mean, you had to work and
Yes.
socialize at the same time, right? Unless it was a feast day or something. But
It's true. It's true.
there's so much bonding that happens when you work together.
Yes, it is. How do you see the male role in the family life? Like, as women, I don't think, or at least I don't hear enough women telling men what their expectations are, how to be a better husband or a father. What kind of suggestions would you have for men?
Well, I'm not a man, so I really don't know.
Okay,
And
I
I'm
love.
not just saying that, but my first two children are girls, and then we had two boys.
Mm-hmm,
And I found it really difficult once they got to their early teen years, because I realized that they didn't need their mom anymore. They didn't want to be
mm-hmm,
mothered.
mm-hmm,
And my job at that point, I felt like, was to really step back and to pray more and to maybe be nudging different directions
mm-hmm.
from farther away. And so I'm not a man, so I really can't say, what men should be doing, because it's outside of my experience.
I like
I
that.
mean, I think there's a lot of great things out there. Men don't need women to tell them what to do. That's,
Yep.
I guess, my point.
Mm-hmm,
And for my sons, I try to put them. They have a great dad. I mean, he's wonderful. He works very hard. He's very adventurous. He loves backpacking, and we just went camping for 3 days in the Sierras, kind of very rustic camping. So he's really great at connecting with the boys. But again, I don't want my sons to only be connected with their dad. Unfortunately, all the grandpas are departed, so we don't have a lot of extended family. But I do put them in front of other men in the church, and so locally there's a man who's teaching the teenage boys how to do maintenance on heavy machinery, and so he gets them together. And what's interesting is, they love the class, right? But now after church, the young men go over to him and they kind of chew the fat with this old guy. And
Yeah.
it's a great thing to see. And
Yeah.
so, again, the more connections your children have with other people in the church, the stronger they're bonded with them.
I like that. You seem to be a very good example of what I think a female leader should be like. Is it okay if I describe you in that way? Like, and if I need to explain that a little bit, I will. But I think you kind of know what I mean.
Well, I don't feel like a very good woman. There's young women that I feel like just get how to be a woman. And I think I do have some leadership skills. I
Mm-hmm.
usually work my way somehow into different leadership positions. But as far as just being a good woman, I think I'm pretty mediocre, actually. I know so many deeply just women I admire. They're more quiet. I'm kind of loud. They have a peace about them. That's kind of what I wish I was like. And I noticed the ladies that come from, whether they're Ukrainian or Russian or Greek, they seem to have that in their blood. And
Yeah.
and I think as a convert, I've had to struggle for every inch of, whatever goodness I have. I've had to really struggle for it. And it was like a gift from their ancestors to them. So I'm a little bit jealous about that.
Well, I think you have to own the fact that you are a convert and you are American and you're leading the new convert female, that because there's a lot of them and they don't really know where to look, right? So a lot of us that were cradle Orthodox or are cradle Orthodox, we do have our grandparents and all that to look at. But I think there's a lot of converts that are coming into the church right now that are finding it very difficult to find their place. And I think you represent a really good example of how to do that. That's kind of what I think, in my personal opinion, as someone that would like you to continue doing shows with us, I think that's something you should really own. I'm sorry if I'm putting it that way. I
No,
see it in you, and I think it's great.
I think it's a mothering tendency. I
Okay.
really enjoyed being a mother. And, as I said, 3 of my kids are out of the house. So I only have the one 16-year-old left, and he's great, but he doesn't really need his mom anymore. So uh, I think maybe the YouTube channel's a bit of an expression of my motherly tendencies to, want to help and encourage, the people.
I think you do a wonderful job of it, and to kind of keep I wanted to kind of go into because I know it's an issue that a lot of my audience has brought up, and I've seen it myself. Kind of trying to fit into a church where it's a little bit too ethnic, and then from your story, you're involved with more Greeks now than in the past, right? Is that true? I think you said you live by a Greek monastery.
Yeah, so my history of parish life is kind of different. I converted in a small OCA mission. Me and the man I was baptized with were the first, actually. And so I was 18, and there was no one in the church between 11 and 30. And so I ended up moving out to California, kind of a long story, but to an old EOC church, Evangelical Orthodox Church. This is the Father Peter Gilquist group. And so this church had converted en masse in 87. And one of the things they had was a big house for young people to live in, young college-age kids to either work or to go to school, but to still live in community. So maybe they weren't quite ready to be on their own. They still needed that extra support. And the different EOC churches up and down the West Coast would actually kind of trade kids back and forth. There were a couple of these houses. So kids would come down from Alaska or Washington or come up from Southern California. And so I went to live there. And that church, I was only in that church for about 4 years, but it had an extremely rich liturgical life. Services twice a day. That's really where I was catechized through the services. But it was all converts, and really fairly recent converts, only a few years, all trying to figure out what it meant to be Orthodox as a group, which is just really tremendously difficult. So that church ended up splitting, actually, about the time that my husband and I left and went to Sacramento. And then we spent the next 18 years in a small OCA parish again, which we really loved. And it was a nice mix of convert and cradle.
Okay.
And now all of a sudden, the last 7 years, we've been living near a Greek Orthodox monastery, one of Elder Ephraim's in California. And my in-laws had retired out here many years ago. And after we had 3 parents die in just about 2 years. And so this was our last grandma in the family. And instead of moving away, we knew we needed to move here to be with her. And so we were familiar with the monastery since we were young, but it was very different to move into an ethnic, well, it's actually not an ethnic community here. So this monastery, lay community around it, is mostly Americans and converts, actually.
Okay.
So I think it's a little unique. It's not like, I think if you visit St. Anthony's, you're going to find a lot more Greeks there, right? You're going to hear Greek spoken afterwards.
Yep.
But here, it's actually a lot of converts and a lot of cradle Orthodox, but American-born cradle Orthodox and not Greek.
Right.
Like we've got Serbian, Korean, we've got a couple different ethnicities. So they've all been kind of unique situations, actually.
Yeah, the reason why I brought it up is I love that story. That's quite the history because you kind of got like a good overview of all of that, and actually intense church life. It sounds like it's part of your being, and that's really great to see. I'm a little jealous and trying to get there myself. Maybe jealous isn't the right word, but I admire it, and I'm trying to get closer to that myself. But the reason why I brought it up is because I know a lot of my audience, there are converts, and in some cases they don't feel welcomed by some cradles, not just Greeks, Russians, Serbians, all of that. And then on the other hand, they have the other extreme where they feel very welcomed. Because if I find that most ethnic Orthodox are either very, very welcoming or very cold. there's no no in between.
The Russians that I have met over the years, or the Slavic people, I should say, tend to be a little more reserved. right? And the Greeks tend to be very warm. But I think the important thing to remember is that Americans have a culture too.
Yes.
And so you're walking in, if you're, an inquirer or new to the church, you're walking in with your own culture, and it's really a clash of cultures.
Yes.
If you can just be patient with the people, they're generally really wonderful, kind people. It just takes you a while to figure them out. The Greeks, my husband tells this story that he was the engineer for the local Greek church in Sacramento, and they were having a meeting for building their new church, and he and the architect had come along. And, this entire group of Greeks are just arguing, screaming, yelling, arms are going everywhere, and they're talking about the kitchen, right? And what's going to be in the kitchen and all this. And the architect's eyes are just huge. He has no idea what's going on. And then at the end of the meeting, they all, okay, bye, and kiss each other and leave.
Yeah.
That's just how Greeks are.
Yeah.
Not all Greeks, obviously, but, Russians would never do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They'd act totally differently. So I would say just give it time, and you'll see, that these people are just being themselves. But in general, they're very welcoming and loving people. And I've met very, very pious Greek people. They're not, I think I mentioned this in the interview with Kyle, that I do get sad when I hear converts saying that the cradle Orthodox aren't pious, or that it's just a culture club. Of course that happens, but it happens in the American churches too. It happens, as I said, I was a Baptist, but we were culturally Baptist, right? And so it happens everywhere. You have people that are culturally that religion, and then you have people that are actually practicing. So, it's hard if you're a new person, I get that, but
I think that the key thing to consider is something that's completely obvious. We're all human, and there's good this and there's bad that. But first and foremost, are we in it for Orthodoxy? Are we in it for Christ? Are we in it for for that experience, making that a lifestyle, or are we in it for other reasons? Whether it's like the convert coming in and being pious and telling someone that's was raised in this how to do things, because of course they're not going to take that very well. And then the reverse has to be true, is that if this is about Christ and you see a new person coming into your church, invite them over. Maybe I know my family, they would invite you over to the house. My family would be like, come on over, after church, and we'll have a barbecue. You don't may have to go that far, but at least making someone feel welcome so that they understand why they're there. And also, a lot of converts have a lot of good questions. And some of those questions are questions we should ask ourselves as Cradle. I know that was my experience when I kind of came back to the faith. I was like, oh, wait a minute, they know a lot more than I do, and I maybe should listen. And I think the reason why I brought this up is I think it has a lot to do with family. I think it has a lot to do with community. And something that I really want to do is online and in my analog life is really build this community. And I think if we don't understand these different roles we all play, men, women, family, older, younger, cradle, converts, if we don't understand these things in this modern world that we're walking into, I think we're going to be lost, and we're not going to be able to take care of each other as a family, as an Orthodox family. Sorry for the little bit of a rant, but you got me excited.
I think you're right. There are still churches probably out there that are a little more closed. I know in '95 when I converted, I actually called the local Greek church first, because the guy that told me about the church, he told me about the OCA church, but it was so new that they didn't even have a building, so they were meeting. This is before the internet. You couldn't really look anything up, right? So I just ended up calling the Greek church. And they actually told me, no, you don't want to come here. You want to go over there. And I thought that was really interesting. And you could look at that as, oh, I wasn't welcomed. Or you could look at it as they knew I'd fit in better over there, right? So, yeah, I think there's been a lot of progress in the last 30 years. The problem is nothing like it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, it was really hard for converts to break in. But, if you understand the history of these people, that will also make it more sense too. If you've been under Turkish occupation for 400 years, you might have an us and them mentality a little bit, and that's understandable, right?
Yeah, I agree with that, because I brought that up on a couple of, when this subject has come up, I always bring that up. You have to understand we were under 400, 500 year occupation. In some parts, we're still under occupation. And keeping that community and that tight-knit family is what helped people survive and actually keep the Orthodox faith alive. If it wasn't for some of those people, it might have died. They might have fizzled out.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing to add there. In terms of
And
homes, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I just want to add one other thing that
Yes,
you
please.
just reminded me of. Another thing a woman can do from her home is, and this is particularly for converts, is to be reaching out to your family, your grandma,
Yes.
your aunts and uncles, right?
Yes.
Or encouraging your husband to do that. You can, instead of, stoking the fires between your husband and his sister-in-law or something, you can be the one that is there trying to create peace and reconciliation and forgiveness and love, right? And so it's not just about our own church communities, but our own families,
Yes.
About 10 years after my conversion, my parents both converted in the same church where I was baptized. And I was really grateful for that. But that, it took 10 years. It took 10 years of them seeing the faith through my life, right? And I really never talked to them about the church because, there were some issues there, and I didn't want to be pushy with them. But that's another thing a woman can be doing to build that family, to help with building the culture.
I think that's a great point that you make there, because it starts at home. I think that's kind of like the point you've been making the whole interview is it starts at home. It starts with your behavior. It starts with your practice, your belief in God, and implementing that. And I like what you just said, because that's true. There's a lot of times you see like a man struggles trying to deal with family issues, whether it's an argument with a family member or this and that. And a good wife has a way about her where she kind of helps guide you towards softening yourself a little bit to be able to have that conversation. And I really appreciate you saying that. That's something that's missing. And I think it's a very important quality that you are perfect for leading. You really are.
But I've thought a lot about this. I think it comes from the whole diva culture. Do you remember when divas were a thing, and it was like all of a sudden it became, trendy to be sassy and, sexualized and extremely selfish. Like that's the opposite of what a woman should be. A woman should not be selfish.
Yes.
Particularly against her nature, I think.
That's really great. I love everything you've said. We're coming close to the end, but I don't want to end it just right now. Sure. I do want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing with your channel. I think your content is great. I know everyone's going to be following you who hasn't followed you for sure. But I definitely I like to do things open on my podcast. If you've watched any of my streams, I just kind of just say things. So I honestly, I want to keep you around, meaning that I definitely want to make you part of the Board No More thing. I think you should be doing a segment for us. You have a lot to say. Awesome.
I'd love to. And I want to say thank you to you because, I reached out to you. I had literally just clicked on your video for the first time. I think it was a live stream, and you were talking about the Orthodox comment sections and how crazy they were. And I had just been thinking about this. I mean, I was only on 2 seconds, and you made the comment, if any new creators want to reach out, go ahead and do that. So 2 seconds. Okay, this is from God. I'm going to reach out.
Yes.
And you've just been very encouraging. It's really hard for, as you know, new creators to come along, and I stand by my old comment because I'm in tech years much older than you are, I'm sure. But it's intimidating, the tech side of it, and just trying to figure out what the conversations are that are happening and who's who. And you've just been really encouraging. I've noticed, not just to me personally through email, but with all the other people that you've had on these smaller channels. And that they've been really great to get to know. And, not everybody has to be a giant, thousands and thousands of followers to make an impact. I think I really hope that other women step up and offer what they can. It shouldn't just be me.
Yep.
And I'm not sure. There were some channels, but I've noticed they quit after about 2 years.
Yes. I have a few in mind, as you just mentioned. Well, I'm encouraging my audience to jump on here. And a couple of them I see are in the chat, and I've reached out to them that I want them to come on and talk about homeschooling and mothering and all of that stuff. So with the Board No More thing, first of all, we're not a big channel. It just seems that we've had through the grace of God, had good luck in who we've booked and conversations we've had. And that's really all I'm interested in, is helping people have, I want to learn. So that's my first reason. And second of all is I want to help others that should be, should have a voice out there, have that voice and that platform. And that's what we're going to do. Like, I'm not trying to plug Board No More, but that is what we're doing, is like, basically we set it up for you. You just jump on, you do your thing, and then you just jump off. We take care of all the tech stuff and all that stuff.
That sounds awesome.
Awesome. And I also want to have, I also found that a lot of the ladies, yourself included, are a little, not shy, but they're afraid to jump in. And I'm going to push you guys. So I do want to have an open panel with yourself and a few others I've kind of reached out to. And now that we've gotten to know each other, that's something that we're definitely going to be doing moving forward. And I want to hear from the ladies. I want them to express some of their opinions. I want to push back on some of them. I also want to have them push back on, on me. I have strong opinions. I have strong views. And I think that we need to have open dialogue, men, women, converts, whatevers. And we do need to have disagreements, and we do need to have a push and pull. And I think that that's the only way that we're going to get through a lot of the mess that's coming our way.
Yeah, I agree totally. And making more room for just personality. Sometimes
Yes.
people are just people. Everyone has their own personality and their own take that they're bringing to a certain issue. And just because someone has a question about an issue, I think of like the deaconess issue. Some people in good faith were asking, well, why can't we? And they're not. They're not trying to be flaming liberals or something, or modernists. They're just asking an honest question. We have saints that were deaconesses. Why do we not have deaconesses now? It's a fair question. And so just kind of calming down a bit and just answering the questions. There's a good reason why we don't, right? So.
Oh yeah, that's now you started another subject I want to go.
I'm not, qualified to talk about that. I'm just
not particularly that specific thing, because neither am I, and that's something I'm very careful with. I have to be honest. I'm a horrible practicing cradle Orthodox, and I'm just trying to get better at it. And that's usually most of my prayers are just like, please help me get better at this. So I don't want to get into things that are over my head, but I do want to comment on the fact that I think that people get into this and they make it like a band shirt. Like, I found the band first. I know more about this band than you know about this band. And I'm going to tell you all about this band because I read all these books and all this stuff. And I think that's extremely dangerous. And I think that we need to have an open forum for conversations. Just like you said, a lot of them may have had really good questions as to why couldn't this person do this, right? And maybe they shouldn't be doing it, but we should hear why. We should be able to have that conversation, why that is. And my rant the other day, that was a big part of it, was like, some people have made some difficult decisions the last couple of years. That it wasn't an easy couple of years, and it's going to get harder. And some people have made mistakes, myself included. And I think that if we don't accept that we've made those mistakes and openly have a conversation about it, how do we expect our children or people after us to not make that same mistake? Like, we opened the conversation at the beginning with the whole whatever podcast and the 304s and all that stuff. Yes, that's a difficult conversation that we need to have. We need to have that conversation openly so the younger ladies and men know how to deal with the situation a little bit better. We don't need them to double down on the bad mistake they've made. We need them to understand that there is forgiveness. There is, through repentance, through the church. Your story that you started off with really shows the hospital of it all. Like, I'm kind of not trying to sum everything up, but I guess I am. Your story in the beginning about your upbringing and all that stuff, to me, what I took away from that is this truly is a hospital. And that if we partake in the medicine, we will be healed. And part of it is understanding repentance, understanding confession, understanding forgiveness. I suck at that. I'm awful at forgiveness. And I think that if we don't do that, we're going to push our problems onto our children and to the younger kids, and we're not going to deal with them ourselves. Any final thoughts on anything that we've talked about, any of the things that are on your mind? If you want to go on a rant, please go for a rant.
Well, it's tempting, but
please do. I love him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to say, when we just brought up my past again, it's like, back then I was just looking for some peace, right? And some stability and truth, right? But if I had known the gifts that God could give you, I mean, I was asking for, a very small amount, and God just gave me so many blessings in my life through the family that, my husband and I raised, and, my relationship with my husband, and, coming from a place where you don't have any family, and people with no family will understand that, like, My family just became everything for me. But I always try to keep it um, with 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 the remembrance that this is a gift from God, and God gave just so abundantly over what I was looking for. And I think if we always remember God's goodness in our life and God's mercy and repentance, we'll be a lot less likely to go around judging everybody else and arguing and doing these things we're talking about. Because who am I? I mean, I was a total train wreck at 18. Like, who am I to call anybody out for anything?
Mm.
No, I'm only here by the grace of God. Like, really.
I agree. Sorry, you every time you talk, you get me either wanting to go deeper into another subject or you move me. And I try to, like, there's, I think 3 times you got me where I had to like hold back, and that was one of them. Yeah, I think that was really well put, and let's end it there. But I'd love for you to plug your show, what it's about, and where. I know everyone's already followed you. Manny's been throwing your link in there, but tell everybody about your channel and any future ideas and things that you have moving forward.
Yeah, I have, so it's Orthodox Family Life. It was originally called Building Orthodox Culture. And I think I'm very much still trying to find my voice. I do conversations a lot better than me talking by myself. But originally I'd hoped to interview more older ladies and kind of record their stories. I'm still working on that, but it's a lot harder to get the older generation to, sit down and be recorded. But I do have some things in the works on education and parenting and the division. We'll be tackling a topic this week, recording division in the family and
Yes.
the whole phenomenon of kids going no contact with their parents and how that happens and what parents can do early on to build a strong relationship with their children. So I'm excited about that one. We have a lot of different saints' lives coming up, and I would encourage people to to listen to my 2 cents about the saints' lives, because I really am trying to pull out something really specific that's important for families. Earlier you mentioned women who kind of soften their husband, right? We were talking about that, and that's exactly what you see in the life of St. Marcello of Chios. And you really get that. You get that conversation between a mother and her daughter, how beautiful that can be and how formative that can be. So we do interviews, lives of the saints, writings from the saints about child rearing and parenting. Have a really good one coming out for the Nativity of the Theotokos by Metropolitan Augustinius, I believe. So, yeah, you can always let me know what you want to hear about. And, if you have older women you think would be willing to come on and talk about things, I'm open to that.
Yes, I'll make sure I'll mention that on a couple of my streams, see if they reach out so we can send them your way for sure. And
Sure.
thank you so much for sitting down with me digitally, and maybe one day we'll do it face to face. But
Great.
thank you for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mano. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Don't hang up because we still have more to talk about. But everyone, thank you guys for watching. Please go follow the Orthodox Family Life. It's a great channel. I think I don't have to tell you any more than that. I think most people are already either following you or are enticed by it, like a lot of the comments I saw in the chats. So love you guys. We'll see you guys soon. Word to Big Bird.